It is time, everyone, for another Activision Blizzard update, because there's always Activision Blizzard updates, and a few rough things coming in from their partners, actually, and then PCGamer doing a report. So it's going to be an interesting thing today. Of course, not particularly great news if if you're, say, Activision leadership. So let's just get straight into it, and I think we're going to begin with PCGamer's coverage and what they went into. So, how Blizzard failed their staff. And they did an article exploring how basically Activision Blizzard failed the women who were working for them. And it's a rather enormous write-up. It's larger than what I'm used to seeing in PCGamer, so I'm happy to see this sort of thing from them. And it contains info gathered from interviews conducted with 3 former employees. And it approaches the idea of how it was impossible not to see misconduct throughout the company. Now, obviously I'm not saying that every journalistic article has got to be like a peer-reviewed scientific journal. We are dealing with 3 sources here, so this is very much stemming from these people's opinions. However, given the overall context of this situation, it's probably worth reading into what they're saying, given the widespread reporting. Yeah. So each of the 3 employees worked at Activision Blizzard for different periods of time across the last 10 years, and all 3 of them have left the company within the last few years. All these people cooperated with the Californian Department of Fair Employment and Housing, that lawsuit. So they're part of that. None of them were surprised by the contents of the lawsuit when it emerged, because they were all too aware of it from working there, and they're all glad they left Blizzard. Back in 2019, even as they were laying off employees by the hundreds, waves, and this is a quote, waves of employees were also leaving voluntarily. And again, this is just the sort of thing where, I do not want to diminish the harms that are happening to people, especially, it seems, to women at Blizzard. There's also the thing, though, for the customers of Blizzard games. And, if you're a World of Warcraft player, where are the patches? Like, why has it all seemingly ground to a halt versus what we experienced during Legion, which should be the bar, when there's other games like Final Fantasy XIV that, bar the COVID-related delay that they announced in their production schedule, they've just had a patch every 3 and a bit months.
Yep.
Clockwork. But WoW's clockwork is clearly broken.
Yeah.
And it makes you think, is it all these departures? I mean, even I remember a few days ago looking at the work Slack and it's, Johnny Cash has left Blizzard. And then literally a few hours later, another person has left Blizzard. And it's like, if that's only the stuff you hear about publicly, I mean, and then we have these people talking about waves of employees leaving voluntarily.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of kicking myself because I didn't check the source or follow up on it, but I did see a quote from someone who claimed to work at Blizzard, or used to work at Blizzard, on Reddit, and they were saying that something like basically the vast majority of people who were leaving are senior level.
Yeah.
And they're replacing them with associate level, which means that they are experiencing a massive brain drain. And they said they sourced this by they were looking at, not of all staff, but they were looking at their Blizzard contacts on LinkedIn and just saying, so many of these seniors that I worked with or I knew are gone and they've moved away. So it's if that's one thing. If they're losing employees, that's obviously one thing. But if they're losing their seniors and their experienced employees and then having to replace them with people who don't have that experience, then how many years is it going to take for them to recover in any sense?
And that's the thing, could you imagine being the game director for WoW and then having to plan out projects, scope things out in an environment where you can't, where staff attrition is perhaps causing a real problem in your production schedule?
Yeah, you just end up with okay, well, plan for this to be done in this month, and then over the next 2 weeks you lose 5 or 6 staff. You're like, I guess 2 months. Cool.
Yeah, and a lot of people would be surprised how much work gets done by how few people, especially when it comes to those systemic things. There are lots of problems in game development where you can't throw more bodies at the problem because the design has to be good.
Yeah.
And I mean, here's what one former employee says she was thinking, quote, "This is the Titanic. We're going toward the iceberg and we're about to crash. These are smart people. I should probably follow suit." Mm-hmm. You're only going to string people along with promises of Overwatch and Diablo and WoW are all going to come out and you're going to get a really big profit share this year. And, all those things get pushed back. You can only do that for so long. Now, for the purpose of the interview, these women were named Iris, Violet, and Holly. That's obviously not their real names. And what we decided to do was pull together the most interesting parts of each of these people's comment testimony. When the lawsuit broke, this is for Iris, she was particularly hurt by the expressions of disbelief from former co-workers and management. She was puzzled by Mike Morheim's apology for failing women, finding it difficult to believe that he didn't know about, quote, the biggest defenders, end quote, at least. Now look, there's even some of those stories that Alex Afrasabi where Mike's in the room.
Yeah.
So it's a sort of thing, well, I think this actually helps more. Iris felt Blizzard was more of a dysfunctional family than a professional environment, lacking in boundaries and consequences for poor behavior. And that's the thing. If you were to be as charitable to Morheim as you could say that he did know these things, but it's a bit like, you've got the dodgy uncle in the family. He's just a hallion for the drink, or he does something or whatever, but he's still in the family. We're not going to kick him out. We're going to give him a scolding every now and then, but there's never a, you fucked up so bad you're not here anymore. Yeah. Is it almost something like that? And now Iris actually is one of the women who was chased by Alex Afrasabi around parties, and it happened in full view of other employees. So that's great. That's great to know. She didn't trust human resources, and she felt she had no options unless she had specific support from colleagues. Iris once reluctantly brought someone to the Cosby Suite during BlizzCon with the pair walking in on a wave of intoxicated behavior that clearly had no place happening at a work event. That's the thing.
Sound?
You're allowed to have broadly speaking, you can have a few drinks at the company party.
Aye.
Whatever can. But you still have to know you're at the company party, and even if you do get pretty drunk, pretty far along, there's just behavior that's off limits.
Yeah.
And this is what we said earlier, the whole family thing.
Yeah, I mean,
it's like, oh, there we go. Uncle Jim's embarrassed himself again. That'll be a bit awkward in the morning, and that's that.
Yeah, you're allowed to, you're allowed to get a bit drunk and maybe get a bit rowdy, but don't climb on stuff. Keep your clothes on. Don't fight anybody.
Don't be going after people. Don't be
Yeah.
chasing people around the room.
Yeah.
Now, of course, HR staff are actually in the room alongside Afrasabi.
Hard
So
to
that's
report to
cool.
them then.
HR is drinking with these people, so you don't have anyone to report this to. Iris was always on alert at Blizzard, receiving inappropriate comments and unwanted touching, namely shoulder massages. So here we go, one of the shoulder massage people, both inside and outside the office. What makes you think you can just walk up to somebody and give them a shoulder massage?
I'm laughing,
It's
but
like,
it's
what?
just so unreasonable.
Is your defense going to be, I would have thrown in the happy ending for free? I can't believe she's not thanking me for the massage. People pay for this, what the...
Jesus.
You can only do that with a complete disrespect, perhaps even disdain for other, for the person.
Yeah.
It's completely messed up. Now, she says the closer a woman works to one of the Rockstar development crowd, the more warnings she would start to hear. The standard one was, watch out for this person if they start drinking. The more specific and the more worrying was, quote, don't go to anything this person invites you to. Because there's loads of people who will just do that, and it will be all about getting the buck.
Yeah.
And to continue, one party became impromptu skinny dipping, while another turned out to be a swingers party to the great surprise of the employee attending.
Jesus.
So I suppose it's like that Louis Theroux episode of the weird California swingers people, but transpose it all with Blizzard devs and their Cool! This story also was mentioned by another interviewee. Now, Iris said that she felt like she and other women were excluded from opportunities and passed over for promotion. Because basically, what a fucking surprise if you're basically just treated as a hot body or, some sort of sexual commodity or something to be lusted over, then no one's going to be like, oh, your design was great. Oh, your code was great and promote you. Also, if these, if you're one of the people who's objectified like this, sure, you could maybe get undue promotion and stuff because of preferential treatment from people who are creepy, but then, so that's really bad. And then the other thing is you don't get promoted because you're never treated and respected like a fucking human. If you're a woman, you didn't look like what they wanted a leader to look like. I guess a proper Blizzard leader has to have a deep, growly voice and get up on stage, hold a microphone and go, geek is!
Yeah.
And then say something embarrassing.
Yeah, they all have to look like they could be riding the wolf on the statue, basically. Big beard, axe in hand, stuff like that. Just
Things got worse. when women, I suppose, challenge design choices like the much criticized over-sexualization of female characters. Those women had a, quote, target on their back. Iris specifically noted that opportunity started to plummet for her when she challenged a design choice that had racist connotations. Now, funny enough, this is a drama that's happened within the World of Warcraft sphere lately, where one of their books, Exploring Kalimdor, it's the sort of thing, WoW does come from an era, and it's like you can't, it is what it is, but, try to do what FF14 does. Like, FF14 will just be like, hey, this is India, that's that, but it does it in a way that, while, maybe it will feel sort of a bit on the nose, to say the very least, it generally, and again, it's not like, even some of our own culture was touched on with, of course, in Shadowbringers.
Yeah.
Where, it feels celebratory.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's the thing that they, I think, always make sure to do with FF14 when they're sort of covering those other cultures. Doubling down on the goblin character of Gallywix. Number one, ruining his character by making him making Gazlo act like Gallywix.
Yeah.
But then just the whole, let's just say there's some other connotations and original design inspirations for the goblins that probably stem in, is it either World War I or World War II sort of propaganda art?
Yeah.
It's obviously not a big fan of a certain group of people.
Yep.
So, there's things like that happening that Blizzard somehow still managed to just do a bit iffy.
Yeah, it's a case where they could solve it by going forward and treating it with respect.
Yes.
But softening some of the edges that people particularly don't like or something like that, but instead they just kind of continue going and double down on racial traits that people think are generally stereotypical.
Yeah.
Just with a general lack of not sensitivity towards the actual the stereotypes involved, but without sensitivity to how people will react, which is fundamentally a bad business move.
Like, I don't want to say, like, look, really, what is art? Well, art, like, explores being a human. Yeah. So,
do whatever you
have
want, like
whatever isterism you want in your game. It's just, if you're going to do that, it's got to be done well. It's got to be part of a really good story. All of that, right? I think Blizzard just sort of messes all that up creatively. Now to continue on, while the problems that prompted so many of her former co-workers to leave Blizzard started many years ago, Holly says the road that led to Blizzard's current reputational collapse started in BlizzCon 2018. The infamous "Do you guys not have phones?" BlizzCon, where Holly said that it was around this time that the idea of Blizzard family began to crack. And as the belief in the Blizzard magic began to fade, employees, quote, stopped putting up with the behavior and pay discrepancies. So actually, when the community had its faith shattered in Blizzard, is that like being, I don't know, could you maybe say like being, say, in a controversial group, maybe like a cult or something, and then you see, or whatever, right? But then you kind of see what the people outside are saying about your group, and you're like, whoa, I thought that's just what normal was. You're telling me that, oh shit. And maybe that actually deprogrammed the come here, work at Blizzard. You're passionate, aren't you? Maybe it deprogrammed that in people.
Yeah, also, if you think about how a lot of these, especially the more devoted and passionate employees, likely got their start, it was going to be as a fan of Blizzard games. It was going to be part of the community. So, in a way, they were effectively like, it's maybe not entirely on the money, but like elevated members of that community. So in their sort of hearts and their souls, they probably still felt members of the Blizzard player base, not just the player developer base.
Yeah. Dude, if someone is a fucking World of Warcraft poop soccer, we've been talking about the poop sockers lately. Let's just say what's the easiest way to describe a poop soccer?
Look at the Urban Dictionary.
Okay, right. So, if let's just say you're poop sock in World of Warcraft, then you get a job at Blizzard.
Yeah.
It's going to take a long time to deprogram some unhealthy relationships and thoughts and parasocial relationships that you have with a corporate entity.
Yeah. So the point I was trying to make is that if you're still part of the player base community, as well as also being the developer community, then those being disconnected will disconnect whatever your ideas are internally. Which means either you're one of the Blizzard developers and this community have clearly lost their way and aren't appreciating what you're doing, Or if you were weighted more towards being a player, then you'll maybe follow the player base and go, what the shit are we doing? Oh god, this isn't very good. And it might kind of awaken you in that sense. Because I think that's one of the problems of, if people were there for the money, they wouldn't care if the money was still coming in. Obviously that wasn't, but that aside, it's just that idea of these people love Blizzard and work for Blizzard because they love Blizzard. Now Blizzard is not worthy of their love, but they're sort of trapped inside.
Yeah, it's just creepy. And even the stories I hear and it's all people's fault because, look, if I lived close to Blizzard, because I've been to that part of the world, and I know there are nice parts of California. Absolutely. Yosemite's in California, isn't it? I think so. I was there when I was like 13. One of the most gorgeous places on earth. So, I'm not saying this is just a default, fuck Cali thing. But that particular area, anyway, for me, it felt like a big urban sprawl. Didn't feel like a place that I would really personally want to be. But equally, from living 5 to 10 minutes away from our office, I understand the value of a short commute. And especially with what that motorway is like if you're going from like Burbank to Irvine. Ugh, you do not want to experience that. It's utter anti-human hellscape. And, it's like the worst of like a big city sprawl. So you want to maybe live a bit closer. But then if you're living closer, it's like it's a big urban sprawl. So with the office facilities being really good, with the food trucks that come, all those even social things that you can have. I mean, Blizzard, if you say you want to be a powerlifter, I think they actually, at least at the point that I was there, some like Olympic tier powerlifters were coaching Blizzard staff on like powerlifting, and they were using Blizzard's super high class training facility. So it's like, man, what a great campus experience. But then obviously, if that's replacing so many other things in your life, and you're going to fall deeper into the cult, and then, bam, this all happens. How do you deal with that? It must be so mentally taxing for the Blizzard staff. So that's a little bit of Holly, but also lots of Iris. Yes. Let's talk then about Violet. Back before we found out that Francis Townsend's distorted and untrue email was actually drafted by the Bobster himself, Activision Blizzard staff, particularly women, merely felt that one of their supposed advocates had publicly turned on them. Violet said she felt Townsend was calling her and her co-workers liars. I could not believe it. I was shaking. She nearly quit in the spot, but decided on a more planned exit after seeking advice. She used up her sick days and then quit. Violet admits there are some genuine people in management at the studio, but she doesn't trust execs like Townsend or Kotick to do anything to actually improve the company. Violet experienced sexual harassment while at the studio, but also had no trust for HR. She reported one man for making rape jokes during a meeting, and all that happened was he tried to find out who reported him. And again, that's the sort of thing that can be a very easy thing, I think, for sometimes for men to joke about. I mean, Call of Duty lobbies, listen to what they can be like sometimes. But I think often there's a very real difference in how that topic is going to feel between people for extremely obvious reasons. So, I mean, to be that unaware, to do that sort of thing in the workplace is just kind of insane. Just like...
Yeah, I mean, I guess it kind of goes to show the level of culture where they were all like, every meeting was this same feeling as, it's just a couple of boys having a chat.
Yeah, like...
Which is fine and all, but then when you keep that attitude whenever you're speaking to a large audience, then you're just being unprofessional.
Do they not even... I never worry about walking alone.
Yeah.
That is literally not the case for loads of people I know.
Yeah, of course.
So, like, as a man, how can you not be aware of that? Strange. Violet reiterates the same dysfunctional family dynamic as Iris, blaming Mike Morheim and other former leaders for permitting an environment where poor behavior was overlooked and professionalism was out the window. And that's the thing. You can be like Morheim. Maybe you want to be more of a cool, chill, hanging back dude. But, I mean... got to think about what you let fester. Like Holly, Violet wasn't surprised about the lawsuit findings. At the time the Blizzard's rep was dribbling away, Riot were also in the grips of their own reckoning, and Blizzard staff actually sensed that they were next. Violet recalls thinking, people think Riot is bad? We knew the reckoning was coming.
Oh dear.
And Riot, of course, have agreed to a $100 million settlement now. Of course, the heavy drinking culture was also another recurring issue, and with HR actively participating, who was going to tell them no? Yeah. Violet eventually stopped drinking around co-workers and faked intoxication to get by in instances where she felt unsafe. Again, she felt unsafe. So, that's the vibes that there's predatory behavior going on, where the lowering of somebody's inhibitions. I mean, why do people maybe slip a pill in someone's drink? It's to extremely lower inhibitions. So if it's this sort of thing where, it is just kind of trying to get the women really, really juiced.
Yeah, I mean, imagine the circumstances under which you must pretend to be drunk, because if you aren't, someone will pester you to drink. You're like, well, I'm fine. Actually, what are you trying to do? There's no right answer there. There's no good answer there, to be honest.
Yeah, now, actually, a more recent thing. She was also critical of Activision Blizzard's approach to firing people after the lawsuit, where people were fired, but the company never explained why. If the firings meant something, they would be like, here's what these people did, don't do this. And that's a really tricky thing, because I imagine there is some sort of technical reason why, you can't just kind of go, this is exactly what they did. But it does at least feel like this should happen.
Yeah.
But then it's the really weird thing, because if you say, okay, this raft of people have been fired. We're not going to say specifically what these people did because of whatever legally bullshit reason. But here's the list of things that people in this general group did. You can't even do that, because then you're like, well, did Jim do a small inappropriate or a very big inappropriate? You can't play, or you have to be specific when you do this. So, look, I don't know what's the done thing here is what I would say. In your company, right? What would happen? Would you actually find out the reason for somebody's termination if it was, something like this? To move on to Holly then. So Holly actually joined Blizzard early on in her career, and she only really got a sense of how bad everything was when she left. She got a new job, and it all felt different. I honestly cannot see anyone doing 90% of the shit that went on at Blizzard at my new company. Wow. Now, she never directly experienced sexual harassment, but she heard the stories. She regularly witnessed the frat bro culture that's now been publicized. Everything was so normalized. I thought this was the entire industry, an industry-wide problem. To some degree it is, but I'm being treated way better than I was at Blizzard. Now, to some of the work issues, basically women in Holly's office were passed over for promotions and had to actively chase raises, whereas her manager just interacted much more easily and affably with white men on the team. It's the sort of thing that people in a company like that, it could be a weird thing of sometimes just not great at talking to women. Yep. But then the problem is, okay, not great at talking to women, but actually you're in a management role now. You are managing women, so you actually don't have a choice there.
That's your job.
And if you being awkward around women means that you're avoiding conversations with them, and, because of that, there's now a systemic unfairness, obviously that's not... I guess it's the thing. It's very easy to be promoted out of competence. And I think that's something that in so many industries we completely forget. Also, company-wide comms were lackluster. Back in 2020, employees were left to worry about the delayed yearly salary increases for months. Activision Blizzard eventually confirmed that they were completing a cost of living assessment to ensure raises were properly competitive, but Holly says they weren't when they eventually appeared. I hate complaining about money, but it's just really unfair for the amount of work and responsibility that's put on folks. We were very, very short-staffed, and we all had to wear many different hats. That's something I continually hear about the company. Whether they were laid off or left voluntarily, every single person I know is in a better position than where they were during their time at Blizzard.
Yep.
I've heard the same I've just continually heard the same. Lots of people, they're at Blizzard for a few years. They're like maybe the salary thingy that a lot of the game devs in California share the salaries that they have. And a lot of them are like, yeah, Blizzard moving away was good. Go to Riot, money double, happy.
Yeah, even if there are different problems or it's not massively better at Riot, obviously it seems to be substantially better now. Even then, the double pay will go so far to make your life better because, if one example is you can maybe afford somewhere where you have time to yourself. Maybe you can afford to not be at the office doing overtime. Maybe you can afford to not be on the campus. And stuff like that.
It's even that a 30% pay increase can feel like so much more than that because it is the pay above the cost of living line. Yeah, that's going to impact lifestyle the most.
Yeah, in terms of numbers, if you're say you're getting paid $1,500 a week, and your costs are $1,400 a week, you have $100 left. you get paid $3,000 a week. You have $1,600 to spend now.
That's just
like in numbers. That's exactly what it feels like. It's insane.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's that interview with 3 women sharing their experiences at Blizzard and how they feel now that they're no longer at the company. We do have some other stuff to talk about, though. We have a rather under-the-radar lawsuit about Warzone.
Yep.
So last year, Acti Blizz launched a formal complaint against the indie developer responsible for the browser-based strategy game Warzone. Wonder how that happened. As you can imagine, this was about the trademark for Warzone as a title. The 2 parties have been disputing for a few months by the time the complaint was filed in April. The dispute was primarily over whether Activision can use the name Warzone at all, and B, trademark it. The browser game was released in 2017, but Randy Flicker didn't file a trademark until October 2020. Now, he did purchase Warzone.com in 2017 and has used it since. Now, of course, COD Warzone, my God, March 2020, that feels so recent. It came out March 2020. Yep. It feels like Warzone's been a staple of our industry for the last 50 years.
Yeah, it's
wild, isn't it?
20 months.
So yeah, it came out March 2020 with a trademark filed in June 2020. Now, Ficker filed an opposition to Acti Blizzard's trademark alongside his own filing in October 2020. Council then sent Activision a cease and desist, demanding that Activision change the name of its game, stop using Warzone's Warzone mark, and abandon the trademark applications. And there was also threat of legal action for massive damages. So, Acti Blizz disagreed. They said that Acti's, Call of Duty Warzone could not be more different from the defendant's game, which is a low-budget, niche virtual board game like Hasbro's Risk, where players take turns moving, numbers across the world, blah, blah, blah. Indeed, is it inconceivable that any member of public could confuse the 2 products or believe they are affiliated with or related to each other. Now, Ficker took issue with the statement, claiming the confusions actually happen routinely. People tell me about how their Xbox can't connect or their PS4 got hacked, how they wish they could carry teammates, etc. My game isn't even on Xbox or PS4. I send the same reply to each of them. Warzone and Call of Duty Warzone are different games. You should contact Activision. I think that's the thing where that is such a tiny percent of a percent of a percent of a percent. Yeah. But it's enough people that it will trickle through to a solo guy's inbox and make him feel like, oh, that's a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
So they were unable to reach a settlement ahead of Activision's formal lawsuit filing in April 2021, which asked the court to declare that the corporation has permission to use the Warzone name, that usage does not infringe on Ficker's rights, that the trademark should be registered, that Ficker should not, and that Ficker should be prevented from bringing further claims against the company regarding this. Now, Ficker acknowledged that he never expected to get his initial ask, but said, I figured I needed to ask for something higher than what I wanted because I expected they'd negotiate down from there. At the very least, I would like to be made whole, he said. I spent around $60,000 on the domain name and legal fees, plus 3 years of my life into this brand, and it hurts, hurts business to have to change the title of the game. So, yeah, basically, there you go. It seems like his game's ticking along. It's actually getting more players. He says he has 80,000 members. That allows for an ad-free experience, and then there's in-game features like cards and settings and stuff. It's grown since launch. He said that it grew more than average last year, but he attributes it to pandemic lockdown, I suppose, as opposed to people getting confused that it's not a battle, people seeking out a battle royale and then falling into his game. Now, an Activision victory here could be, a blow to a small business that would even has less resources than his. Commander stating that it could lead to weakened intellectual property protections for smaller studios who could just quite simply be outmuscled by the big companies. Of course. So this is a quote from a clinical institutor at the Harvard Law School's Cyber Law Clinic. This case is really interesting because there's a doctrine known as reverse confusion, where the senior user of the mark, who is the one that first used it in commerce, so this would be Mr. Ficker, is much smaller than the junior user, who can basically flood the market with information about their use. People who would have never heard of Warzone, the indie game, will have seen a ton of ads for Call of Duty Warzone. People will think that the indie game is therefore associated with Call of Duty because the junior user of that mark has more people, has a larger audience. So it's all quite interesting then.
Yeah, it's a really interesting kind of problem to deal with because, how, I guess this is going to come down to what the decision is made from the legal side of things, but like, what's the actual outcome? What way should the law rule here? Because, if you look at, if this were, say, IP or a patent, if there's a patent being talked about, then you would have, the prior, I can't remember the name of it, but the prior usage case where this would just be easy win for Ficker's Warzone because it was out in the public for years and was clearly available. But then comes the trademark. So like that's a different game technically, but I guess it's the reverse confusion thing's the important part. How much is this guy benefiting from being called Warzone now? And how much does that take into account everything? Because obviously look at it like from a purely like pragmatic ethical perspective, he should probably win because he was first.
Yeah.
But how much has he benefited? And how much, does it end up going, all right, shake hands, you're both called Warzone, have a good day? It's a really, but you also don't want, companies to be able to just walk over people like, that was a cool name. Well, it's ours now. At least not without paying for it.
Yeah.
Because this is a case where Activision probably would have got away with going, hello, Mr. Ficker. Here's, I don't know, about 100 grand, 200 grand for your Warzone domain name and your trademark. Fuck you for getting there first, but this is how it works.
Yeah.
Will at least be fair as opposed to just, you're going to sue us for trying to walk all over your brand, little man? Well, our legal team will just shit all over your dinner table now, which I think is kind of the problem that we're looking at here.
Yeah. So we'll have to see.
Yeah.
Do you have a final bit of news, though, which is two partners distancing themselves a little bit. So what we have in the dock here is Lego. Also, Phil Spencer did weigh in.
Yes,
so we'll talk about both of those. Right, I'll kick us off with Lego then. So, yeah, the Lego company have confirmed they're indefinitely delaying the release of their Overwatch 2 Titan set as they are evaluating their owning relationship with Acti Blizz. Just saying that they're reviewing their partnership given all of the concerns. So there you go. I mean, some people sort of saying, it's a bit late to the party here, guys. But obviously, a Lego set is not going to make or break Activision Blizzard, but this is obviously not a good thing.
Yeah.
Right? This is just more partners falling away. And then Phil Spencer, he didn't say anything specific, but he basically said that, no, things have changed with our working relationship with Activision Blizzard.
Yeah, so I've got his quote here, which this is from a pretty lengthy New York Times article that we'll probably talk about in a different video because it has some other interesting things about
sweet.
Xbox, but he specifically said, the work we do specifically with a partner like Activision is something that obviously I'm not going to talk about publicly. We have changed how we do certain things with them, and they're aware of that. But this isn't about us. For us, Xbox virtue shaming other companies, Xbox's history is not spotless. So it is basically just, a non kind of committal. We change how we do things, which to me comes across as, we're going to vet companies for massive PR damage for working with them in the future a little bit closer instead of just taking them at face value.
Yeah.
Which I think in this sort of case, obviously you would do it pretty quickly with a smaller company, but actually doing it now for larger companies is going to be very interesting. Even though you could really get away with, okay, we should maybe do a quick Google, maybe ask some employees under the radar if they're not going to wreck us PR-wise. Because, obviously they've been working for Activision for how many years now? Hard to know this stuff ahead of time, but at least them being, he says it's not about virtue shaming, but also it is, and I think that's what's actually going to work in the long run, realistically.
Yeah, hey, modern day, what's it all about? It's all about narratives. So it's, it's hitting on the narrative level. That's probably what's going to land the blow, I suppose.
Yeah, that's the fun thing about Lego. Lego's a thing where, is that article going to show up for someone who's looking for Lego news? Is someone who's looking for Lego news going to, be a small portion of the populace, but they're also going to be a potential Overwatch 2 customer? And they're going, what's it? Oh, cancelled? Oh, why? And then you've got all of those parents who are looking for Lego Overwatch sets for kids or something like that. obviously, I don't know how many kids are interested in Overwatch 2, but, the kind of point goes that definitely when you have news like that coming from outside the actual gaming industry, then you start to get really, really dangerously close to a massive amount of the audience that they expect won't see the news about. Activision Blizzard have horrible working environments. People who haven't seen that news might because of this.
Yeah.
Also, it just kind of shows that this was planned. This was an Overwatch 2 set planned for February the 1st, 2022. We don't know if Overwatch 2 is launching this year yet.
No, I don't believe it is. I believe it's 2023. I think both it and Diablo are back. That was one of the things that was kind of like a bit sneaky in and around the time of the one of the recent earnings calls.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, I remember that now.
Yeah,
so,
I think the thing that was being cited was the changes in like sort of team and director.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So
imagine being Lego and working with it going, all right, we're gonna time this product launch in with your product launch for maximum waves of purchases and interest and investment stuff. When are you thinking? February 2022? Okay, sure. Roll around January. Where is it? Don't know.
Yeah.
Fuck, sorry, I haven't a clue. Oh, God.
Yeah, so look, basically it's rough for Blizzard. The reverberations of this suit are continuing to reverberate. The only way that we can know these things get better is, well, what happens with all these lawsuits and stuff, once they actually, track, right, once time goes, and that could be a while. I mean, look how long it's even taken for the Riot one. It'll just be that, and then seeing, does that attrition rate decrease? And you know what? That employee attrition rate, it's fast becoming one of my favorite metrics in the industry. I think it tells so much. Yeah,
it's a shame we don't have access to more of it, generally speaking. Yeah. But I think that's going to be the key going forward, because if you're to track the overall narrative of game development management, not game development, but game development management from a managerial perspective and a product line perspective. I was talking about this recently with people, or with one person in particular, about why there's no fast tie-in games for movies or IP anymore, or why they're all 400 years later, and just opportunities are massively missed on. And it's just thinking about the amount of available employees and the amount of quality available for employees with experienced employees, and this whirlpool of everyone been sucked into this one massive AAA machine and then mostly been spat out, means that what does the next 15 or 20 years of video games look like? And it looks a lot worse and a lot smaller than if workers are being treated correctly now.
Yes.
That's the thing that I will hopefully I'm not, but I'd love to be in 10 years time just seeing games being shit and going, haha, I fucking knew it.
Unless a lot of those people leave their companies, form new companies, and actually it turns out that it's less games are shit now, and it's more of a rotational thing away from the old guard of the AAA companies and to some sort of new guard of newer, younger companies who are doing things better.
There is
That's what we would want to hope.
Yep. So there is precedent for this, and not modern precedent where you see a lot of people moving out into smaller cities, smaller stuff like we've been seeing recently, but there's actually precedent with it if you look at EA and Activision in their early days. In the 90s to early 2000s, they basically swapped who was caring about developers, and whoever cared about developers the most at that time saw the proceeds. They saw success, and then they started to EA is treating everyone really well. Oh no, EA have gotten too big for the boots, and now everyone's been treated like shit. Here's Activision treating everyone really well and poaching all of EA's employees. Oh, they're doing really well. What's going to happen next time EA come in? And just this cycle
continues.
And it's cycling now, but I think it's not. It's the big all AAA is in this one big bit of working at the same pace, and it'll be everyone on the outside doing things correctly and cultivating experience.
So I suppose here's to the Nightingales of the world, the AA companies, the sort of new startups. Hopefully they kind of pave this next generation of games for us.
And please
pave the way.
Rescue everyone of value and everyone who might potentially be of value from the existing AAA. Please. Thank you.
That's it. Strip the AAA companies for parts. And with that said, thanks for watching. Hope you found things interesting today. Let us know what you think. And we'll see you in the next video tomorrow. Goodbye.